kind of like this new character is belittling an old character. I feel like a lot of people do not like stuff like that. Where they're just like,
Yeah, I mean, well, I was just like asking in regards to the Sarah Connor character. I can definitely. It kind of seems like they're doing the whole Star Wars thing where they're like, oh well, we're getting rid of anything legacy and interesting and just inserting our own original fan fiction in the middle, right? Because that's what this kind of sounds like. Oh yeah, it's not called Skynet, it's called Legion. Ooh, we are Legion. Did you read V for Vendetta? Yeah, like
yeah,
it's not it's not like it's not some kind of high IQ like one-to-one shift of things. It's very lazy, and I'm not really too sure why they decide to do it. Like, do they ever explain like why it forked off and became Legion?
I think their whole premise is that I think they were just saying that it's like it's a futuristic thing where they develop a way to kind of launch nukes or whatever it may be, or basically have an AI do everything for them. So that's why it's called Legion, because it's like an AI program.
Sure, but what happens to Skynet? That's the thing that I'm wondering.
The whole thing,
Is
yeah,
Skynet?
and that's the thing. It's like Skynet gets erased, or like it doesn't get called Skynet because the actions of John Connor dying, as well as the scientist guy in Terminator 2 dying,
Yeah.
leads to non-existence of Skynet. So technically, it is Skynet. It's just not called that.
Oh, it's just called okay something different. I
Yeah.
don't know. But
So
then
so
it's like
and
why
because that's
even
the thing,
yeah, but then even why
if you
even
look at
call it?
it, like even just
That's frustrating.
the guy who's hunting him, the Rev 9, it's the same
Mm.
exoskeleton as basically as a normal Terminator, anyways. So it's just like it's there, but it's not called the Terminator. So it kind of stuffs up everything almost. So that's why it's a yeah. I don't know. It's weird.
I don't know. It's kind of frustrating in the sense that uh, it just doesn't make sense like why they would even change the name if it's not going to have like a relevant component in the plot of the movie.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of things in this movie that, yeah, it just, I think they just kind of had to do it, and yeah, because Arnie's there, but it's kind of like a send off to Arnie. It's a send off to all these characters, and it's got this new reboot, which apparently is probably not going to happen, just for the sole reason that it's not making any money and no one's interested. Um, and
I don't know. It's just a
and I
bit of
feel
a
like
shame.
Terminator is kind of like a dead franchise, because my whole thing was you can't do much about Terminator because it revolves around the Connors. So then they must have heard my what I said and then just killed off the Connors basically, and they're just like, yeah, now we're gonna focus on these new characters, and they can just keep on rebooting in such a way where it's like, well, this person's now the new leader of the Resistance, and we're gonna do all these things. So I feel like, I don't know, Terminator is just one of those things, and it's not only that, but like as mentioned before, you need Arnie, or you need someone who has the charisma of an Arnie. It's like pretty much lightning in a bottle to have that type of character. And it's like no one has come up to the plate and done something interesting or new that would replace Arnie's character. Like, Grace is just a very boring character. Everyone else in the Terminator franchise is kind of like whatever. It's like Arnie makes it. And you need someone who, yeah, has the right charisma to kind of pull the movie through. So it's a hard one.
I think they just need to shelve it, man. Like I think this, I don't. They won't. Obviously,
I
they're
know
gonna
this
they're
made no
gonna drag.
money. This made no money. Worse than Genesis, I think. So it's like, and even
Really?
China's
Wow.
not even watching it. So I don't know. I feel like if they're gonna do it, if they're gonna shelf it, it has to be for at least 10 years, and it has to be actual, like, let's reboot the whole thing.
I don't know. I
Pretend all the
think
other movies don't exist, or
yeah.
they do the whole Salvation thing of being like,
On it,
it's a war
honestly,
movie now.
this is what they need to do. They have to do reboot. This is my suggestion if they're listening, right? My suggestion is reboot. Don't focus it on Arnold Schwarzenegger. Don't focus it on John Connor. Don't focus it on anything else, because it's clear that these things are fundamentally the reason why the movie is being restricted, and they haven't been able to get somebody to, if they're not getting James Cameron to kind of continue on the what happens after the 80s, it's going to fundamentally fail. I think part of the reason why also the Terminator 2 movie was interesting was because you had these highly advanced robots coming into the past and then needing to use technology in the past to, or like, figure out how to use things in the past to achieve their objectives, right? Like, one of the first things you see Arnie do is, he obviously acquires clothes, he acquires like a motorcycle, in T2 at least. And later on, like he gets his hand on like like a phone book, and they go, back when we used to use phone books, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why isn't there a component of Terminator that utilizes, it always seems to be in the future. That's when these movies, because is it set in 2019?
Yeah, it's in Monday. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that's the thing. I think they focus too much on, oh, by the way, Skynet's still continuing, rather than it being, oh, Skynet is still in its infancy. I think that's what they need to do. That's a kind of interesting part of it, because in T2 they're only really focusing on two. In the first movie, there's one Terminator. In number two, it's two Terminators. In number three, the apocalypse is already happening. There's like a trillion billion Terminators being built, and a nuke gets dropped. There's like a bunch of things that are happening, rather than having a very short, sorry, not short, but like a small self-contained story. Kind of reminds me of the Sarah Connor Chronicles. I don't know if you ever watched that,
Mm-hmm.
but that show was pretty decent, and it did exactly what I'm saying right now. It's like a very small-scale Terminator show. There are like, the main character, she is a Terminator as well, but she has these small missions where she has to kind of go about figuring out how to like destroy this or kill this person or protect. Is it John Connor? I think it's John Connor. Connor's in the show from memory, but I think they have to like either scale it back and be like, hey, this is set in the 90s rather than the 80s, right? And then, oh, how do we use what was available in the 90s? Oh, like we just got the internet, we just got such and such, and I think that's probably the better way to do Terminator, rather than focusing on the, oh, hey, by the way, it's too late. And they kind of do it in Terminator 3 in a sense that Arnie says, you didn't stop the apocalypse, you only delayed it, right? So I think like the subsequent movies should always be that
You have to keep up the delaying everything. I mean, like
they have to.
we
Like,
need to
that's
stop
the
at
thing,
this
like,
point, or else it's over. We have to stop at this point, it's an over, and that could be a
yeah,
cool different premise.
I think that's what it has to be. Like, sure, Skynet is inevitable, but the movie has to be centered around the fact that Skynet hasn't gone online, or it hasn't done, whatever it is, but they've sent something back in time that they have to figure out how to defeat. And unfortunately, like, I don't know, and here's the problem. I don't know how you get any more advanced than a liquid Terminator. That's the problem. Right?
It's like, you wrote yourself in a hole.
Yeah, like how do you defeat that? Like, they barely defeated the liquid Terminator that they had, right? And partially that was because, like, it's kind of plot conveniences, but also like, it made sense contextually when it all happened. Now if they kind of do the same thing, like, it'd be more interesting, where it's like, maybe they have a liquid Terminator, but maybe they can't.
Well, they can write themselves out of a hole, because they'd be like, okay, the Terminators that we're sending through aren't working, so clearly, like, maybe they found out the weakness of that Terminator, so then they build, like, a new immunity type of thing, where it's like, I don't know, because, like, in the future, they'll be like, oh, we have now cryo grenades, or whatever it is, and now they're just like, shit, it doesn't work anymore.
I mean, you even mentioned something like the EMP, like, that's a pretty cool way to kind of come up with, like, a concept, but, maybe if you kind of scale it back, and, I think in Genesis, they had these acid traps and stuff. Like, there's some interesting things that you can try and come up with, that could be the plot element. Like, for example, they find out the here's one that I'm just giving out for free. So there's a Terminator that comes back in time, right, trying to kill John Connor and his mother or whatever. And there's a liquid Terminator coming after them. But then the solution is that they have to go find the person who inevitably, like, comes up with the idea to create the liquid Terminator technology, and maybe they just have to either rewrite it, so it's more like they don't prevent the creation of Skynet, they maybe delay the ability of the I guess the nanotechnology, the liquid nanotechnology, and then you kind of see it happen in focus where this Terminator that's made out of liquid then becomes like a solid Terminator, or kind of like changes or somewhat, and then that's how they defeat it, because they change like the engineer's code or something simple like that. But obviously that's maybe it's not as easy to write something like that, but I'm just saying, like, there's alternative ways that you can do it, but you just have to have it more small scale rather than, oh, it's the end of the world. And I'm kind of sick of these apocalypse films, right? I think there's too much when if the show isn't set in the apocalypse, it's not interesting, right?
Because you can do something that scale back.
Like Mad Max is interesting because it's a post-apocalyptic film, whereas the whole thing is like, oh, there's an impending blah 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 blah, and it's kind of like you're in a future that's kind of technologically advanced, but then it's also like an apocalypse. So it has this weird like identity crisis where it doesn't have that in Terminator 2. It isn't an apocalypse in that particular future. I think Genesis wasn't like that as well, and I think that's the reason why Genesis kind of worked. It's just a really bad put together film, unfortunately. But yeah, I think it's a shame that Terminator is never going to be good. But trust me, I think there's going to be another one coming out within the next 5 years. Yeah. I don't think this is going to be put in the vault. It's got too much brand recognition, and there's going to be some either a director or someone who convinces the bigwigs, hey, you know what? I'll convince Arnie to come back, or I'll convince Linda to come back, or I'll get that black guy from number 2 to come back. I don't care. I'll bring someone back. I think they'll do it. But I think if they do it that way and they don't, the other option is you do like a fresh reboot. Like maybe
I feel like they have to do the fresh reboot because Arnie's in it, but he's relatively old, and you can kind of see his age in the film. Even same with Linda Hamilton. You have to, like, as I mentioned with the story, the John Connor killing scene. That's a really amazing CGI that they looked like they were from Terminator 2. Like, they de-aged them so significantly. It looks like that was a deleted scene from the movie, and it's like that was amazing technology.
That's amazing.
However, I don't think people would have the budget to do that. Like, that was only a sequence that was like literally like 2 minutes long. I do not think you could have a whole movie of that.
Like all the budget went to creating that.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So either they do that, or they do a complete reboot where they're just like, it's still Sarah Connor, it's still John Connor, just that they have to replace him with actors. The hardest one is obviously going to be replacing Arnie's character. As I mentioned before, there's not really anyone, because like Arnie is just like in general is like a very special like a personality. He became the governor. He's an actor. He's a bodybuilder. He goes to conventions and talks to people. Like, he is such an iconic person around the world that you need someone as iconic to do that kind of role, or even have the same bravado almost. Like, I can't think of anyone else to do that. Like, that has.
Well,
that.
yeah, I think he's a product of that era where we used to have things like action heroes. We had someone who would just be typecast as this main character, and even though it didn't even make any sense, right? Like, Arnold Schwarzenegger is an American guy, but he sounds like like an Austrian, like, European dude. But who cares? It doesn't matter, right? Like, it used to be in an age where nobody cared about that aspect of it. Nowadays, people want to cast people who are whatever they're supposed to be, and if you're typecast, too bad, you're typecast, right? There's a reason why all these Pirates of the Caribbean films are doing so well, because all of it is really popular in China, and they keep eating it all up, right? Like, unfortunately, this is the kind of world that we live in, that people just want to have that kind of repetition. I think we just need new ideas, personally. But if they're going to do Terminator, they should do it from the beginning. Get rid of Sarah Connor, get rid of John Connor, come up with like a new fable, and just use like Terminator movies as like a baseline. And maybe they can even make reference to it. Like, maybe they can even introduce
a different timeline.
Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. That's maybe what they do. Like, instead of going time traveling, they go multiverse, right? It's like the classic DC formula. Let's not go forward and back. Let's go across. Let's go across different timelines and try and figure out, like, maybe the goal is like trying to figure out, like, what is there a timeline where they defeat the Terminators? What happens there? And maybe that's the liberation point, right? But hey, I don't know. We don't get paid enough to figure out how to solve.
I
big
feel like that.
Hollywood
I feel like that
problem.
our collaboration, like brainstorming right now, is probably a lot more than like a lot of people in Hollywood.
Yeah, I think so too, man.
It's like we just fixed the problem for you. Well done. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, Dark Fate is kind of whatever. It's just gonna be part of. It's gonna be smushed in with Genesis and all the others, and it's just gonna be all of them just keep on losing money, and who knows anymore. But I've kind of lost faith in it until they reboot it at some point. But yeah, that's going to be us for this week. As always, please like, share, and subscribe our content. Really appreciate it because it makes us grow, especially if you like our content. Remember, you can always listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, Libsyn, and our YouTube channel, Marketing Movies, where we do stream it, when we can. So until next time, maybe Henry Cavill can actually be a Terminator.
that'd be pretty cool. I'd like that.
I think he could do it. So, but yeah, until next time, see you guys.
Gotcha.